This is a Phoenix Data Project video, here to serve up little nuggets of insight to help you understand our pandemic. Today's video, Virus Momentum and Metrics. Starting from the end of October last year, we've had a lot of pain, sickness, and death. If we'd acted earlier, we would have been spared some of the worst of the winter surge. But in order to act earlier, we need better markers for our tiers. The metrics for these boundaries that SFDPH has on their website should be evolving and improving, but they aren't. They were inadequate back in October, and they're inadequate now if, or when, the new variants come to town. You can tell our metrics are flawed because we jumped from yellow directly to red without moving through orange. Our metrics are also flawed because San Francisco announced a drastic total shutdown on December 4th without much warning. One of the ways to improve our metrics is to take momentum into account. What do I mean by momentum? I mean whether the virus is growing or shrinking. I also mean how fast it's growing or shrinking. To see how to use momentum, let's plot San Francisco's case curve up to October 20th. I'm actually going to show you the same numbers in two different ways. I'll draw a line through each to estimate where our epidemic might head. Now let's take a look at where it actually went. Because the virus grows exponentially, the right logarithmic plot did much better than the left linear plot. I'll come back to this particular plot, but now let's use this logarithmic plot to look at LA's ICU curve. This is a study in what not to do. The virus clearly had momentum by November 15th, and yet LA didn't act. They waited all the way to the start of December, at which point 15% ICU capacity wasn't a sufficient buffer. The collision of ICU need and capacity became a catastrophe of sickness and death. Now, let's look at SFDPH's mixed performance. Here's San Francisco's ICU plot. We could have recognized the ICU momentum in November, and perhaps the ICU curve would have looked like this. Unfortunately, we waited another couple of weeks. Thankfully, by the start of December, SFDPH did recognize the hellish upward momentum the virus had and pulled the trigger on a hard shutdown at 25% ICU capacity, instead of waiting for the state's 15% threshold as LA did. In doing this, they saved us from the catastrophe of overloaded hospitals, but they did not spare us the pain of strict closures and a bit of excess sickness and deaths. So going back to our first plot, let's drop the actual color scheme and ask what the tiers should have looked like. I agree with the transition from red to orange. If this downward momentum here had continued, I would have put SF in the yellow tier. But downward progress stopped in October, and the virus had no momentum either up or down. I would have held us in the current tier of orange, waiting to see what would happen. Would cases go up or go down? When it became clear at the end of October that the cases were climbing, I would have put us back into the red tier. Being in the red rather than the yellow tier at the end of October, start of November, would have started bending the curve down. Perhaps our curve would have looked like this, and perhaps outdoor dining would have remained in place over the holidays. In summary, we need our metrics to pay attention to where the virus is headed and not just where it's at right now. In my weekly dashboard reports, I always consider the momentum of the virus. If you'd like to receive that information, please sign up for my email list.